Good day. Welcome to Powertalk Live on Power 106 FM and the Jamaica News Network, JNN. It's a nice combination, eh? I'm your host, Ronald Thwaites, and with me is my co-host, Roston Hyman of Real Business. Later on, Dr. Canute Thompson, the UWI academic and public commentator, joins us to discuss his article in yesterday's Observer, From Poverty to Prosperity, for whom? The bottom line is our introduction to Power Talk Live today. Ralston, greetings.
Morning, Ronnie.
You know, I'm noticing a useful phenomenon in the press, and that is that as thousands of parents prepare for back to school this year, more and more of the financial institutions are offering back to school loans.
Yes.
I hope they're not offering them at 15 and 20%.
Yes.
Which is a point I'm not certain on.
Right.
But because they don't publish their interest rates.
Right.
But many of them allow a month's moratorium, or even more, or a longer period in order to settle loan balances.
Yes.
And I just wanted to congratulate the financial institutions at all levels for this kind of flexibility. It is the continuation, I almost wanted to say the beginning, but let's be kind, the continuation of a proper focus and priority on credit in Jamaica. Education is worthy of achieving credit.
Right.
And it speaks to a very pressing need. My own impression, more than that, my own count, is that it's going to cost about $100,000 to send a high school student out, particularly the higher grades.
Right.
And only perhaps 20 or 25% less for a primary school, and perhaps 50% less for an early childhood student. Now, in these circumstances, given the, what you'll tell me, 600,000 people operating at a minimum wage level, and probably another 500,000 of labor age who are poor, then some kind of facilitation is absolutely necessary.
Certainly.
How do you see it?
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, we want to see more of the country's capital going towards developing its human capital. We have been spending on infrastructure and all kinds of things, forgetting that if you do not have the people to drive the process, then you're going to have a problem. That explains why we have the lowest levels of unemployment while economic activity is still lackluster.
Can we deep it a bit?
Right.
One of the things that I think Jamaicans are not sufficiently thoughtful about is that development, development particularly in a capitalist structure, cannot succeed without certain foundational social assumptions, or social infrastructure.
Correct.
It cannot.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes.
And the proper competencies and attitudes of the worker at all levels is essentially one of those, or part of those, social foundations.
Precisely.
And therefore, if you don't have punctuality, if you don't have good hygiene, if you don't have settled personal relationships, all nutrition, facilities like books and transport, lunch money, all these things that go towards the achievement of virtuous ends and result in productivity, prosperity, profit, and prosperity.
Right. So the capitalists, they try to put that in one word, the market. So we want people to understand, when the capitalists tell you about the market, it's really about the people.
Really?
Yeah. So
Okay.
economics
not just
is
a purchaser.
no,
not just
economics
a
is,
customer.
no, it's people. Economics is fundamentally
You've trained me in something this morning.
Fundamentally about people.
Yes.
Lionel Robbins told us that economics is the study of human behavior.
Okay.
So it's about the people.
So it's a broad concept.
Precisely.
It takes into account all aspects of culture.
Precisely.
And once again, I insist, we are failing to accept in Jamaica that it's not just a question of how you get money and whether that you have plenty or you don't have none. Yes. What development of the whole.
Yes.
And the congeniality of the individual
Precisely.
within that whole
Yes.
requires certain social fundamentals.
Precisely.
And if you don't have those fundamentals of an appropriate family structure,
Yes.
a serviceable education,
System,
health structure, and we're coming back,
Yes.
then no matter how much money is swirling around,
Yes.
you will not have a viable society.
Precisely.
And you will, and what you think is economic prosperity
Yes.
is going to burst like a balloon
Precisely.
very soon. It cannot be sustained.
Precisely.
So
Precisely.
these are important issues,
Yes.
and therefore the question that follows
Yes.
on this, the bottom line appropriately, is are we paying sufficient attention to these things?
No.
Now, where we started off was we were giving credit to the financial institutions for being more flexible now
Yes.
than they ever were
Yes.
before
Yes.
in respect of educational expenses.
Right.
But that's a very important, but a singular
Precisely.
aspect. There's more.
Precisely. And that flexibility is being induced by government policy.
Yes.
Because if they do not and are not investing enough in the real sectors of the economy, such as businesses, that leaves them with only the cars and the consumer goods. So that is why now they have to be looking at the education sector, because they have all this cheap money and all this liquidity, and they're unwilling to deal with the productive side. They're saying those people are too risky, and they're overwhelmingly in the car side, which help to drive stimulus in other economies. So they have to be funding human capital. We want to see more investments in our human capital, because investing in infrastructure, consumer goods and cars without investing in human capital makes no sense in the long run, because you need properly trained and properly paid people to afford those goods and services. Those houses that they are building for 25 million and 44 million, you need properly trained and educated people to occupy those houses.
So I want to press the argument a little further.
Right.
First of all, there is the effort now, I think there's a consensus over the fact that we want to use the accumulated pension funds of the Jamaican workers
Yes.
for a variety of more productive purposes
Right.
than has been in the case in the past,
Right.
when in fact government paper was gobbling up
Right.
most of it.
Right.
All right. Having passed through that fitful experience, where you have pension funds that could be available
Yes.
for long-term investments like education, yes, and I'm coming particularly to the second limb of my point, which is tertiary education.
Yes.
It strikes me that supporting people in tertiary education is one of the most immediate and worthwhile
Yes.
investments that you can make.
Yes.
Now it has to be it has to have proper prudential requirements.
Precisely.
Bonding, you can't run away and don't pay a
Yes.
loan. It has to be a first charge on your earnings,
Yes.
etc.
Yes.
But if we do not offer that,
Then you have a problem.
you have a
A
problem.
very big one too. You will continuously be creating jobs at the lower end of the scale,
Yeah.
which has very little impact on GDP.
Yeah.
So you won't meet the growth targets.
In which case, I want to suggest support for the president of the Northern Caribbean University, who
Yes.
at their graduation last weekend is reported as saying that we should be offering loans, scholarships where appropriate, to all institutions that are offering tertiary education.
Agreed.
Rather than tilting most of it towards the very reputable and very deserving
Yes.
University of the West Indies.
Yes.
Which means we don't want to take away from them.
No.
Would be rather
Broaden the base.
See this as a broadened base
Precisely.
for investment.
And we have enough resources to do
We
it.
do.
Yes.
But one caveat.
Yeah.
We must make sure, and I'm very cautious about the University Council of Jamaica, we must be careful we don't accredit institutions which are in fact not up to the standard and quality.
Quality issue.
Yes?
Yes.
And there has been a tendency, and I blame certain recent leaders in the education sector, that, okay, what we want to do is show we have a whole heap of opportunity.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
And we are certifying particularly bachelor's degrees, yes, which do not stand the test
Yes.
of global competitiveness.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Global competitiveness.
Yes. Yes.
Yes?
So the quality issue is key.
This was one of the reasons why, when I had some responsibility, I linked the degrees at the teachers' colleges with the certification of the University of the West Indies.
Yes. Okay.
Because at least we know where UWI
Yes.
stands.
Precisely.
Some of these standalone colleges and universities, we need to look far more closely at. And there is no sympathy, there is no special pleading,
Yes.
there is no desire to show that we are really got so many institutions
Right.
or so many foreign
Quality
connections.
must be the emphasis.
Quality is the underlying it's part of the social presumptions
Yes.
of the economic model
Right.
that we're speaking.
Correct. Quality.
Okay, so then we have to ask then, those funds must be made available, can be made available, and we want to encourage the increasing flexibility, the opening of the door wider in the commercial banks, etc., to help tertiary students
Yes.
borrow money,
Yes.
yes,
Human capital.
borrow money
Yes.
to improve
Yes.
the human capital.
Precisely. Because if we're not doing that, you notice we are improving infrastructure, improving all kinds of things. If you do not improve the human capital, then you're not going to be able to maximize the infrastructure, and you're not going to get the level of economic growth that you are seeking. Simple.
Well, this is it. So in a sense, we're putting things upside down.
Kind of upside down. Yes, we're upside down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, if you go back either to Fidel Castro, if you're a devotee of the left,
Yes.
or if you go to Lee Kuan Yew of the right,
Yes.
both of them in their revolutionary struggles place the development of human capital
man.
as the first priority, not the incidental second thought.
Yes.
Yes? Not the education budget, which is flat,
Yes.
and the national security, which is
High.
bulging.
Yes.
Yes? Not the big money being spent on fancy roads, wonderful though they are,
And apartments too.
and apartments, okay? And letting down the institutions who are about to open and can't get their bathrooms fixed or have no particular source of,
Right.
of the materials that they need to teach.
Right.
No,
Right.
this to me is a critical mistake that we've been making.
Yes.
And it is said only with a desire to encourage correction.
Yes.
There is still time to do that.
Yeah, man.
One of the points that Dr. Canute Thompson makes in his article, which we're going to discuss later with him, is that he, of course, like most of us, expect a spending spree by government of people's money next year.
Yes.
Well, that's for their election binge.
Right.
Puerile though that is. But can we say that the place to splurge on is education and
Human
training?
capital.
Human
yes.
capital.
Yes. Yes.
That's a recommendation
Can't lose on that.
that we'd like to make
Right.
on the bottom line. And we're saying this from our own understanding of the local context, but also by every historical model that we can possibly draw on. Why not? The bottom line returns after this break. This is Power Talk Live. Welcome back to the bottom line on Power Talk Live with Ralston Hammond of Real Business. We're looking at the ingredients that make for sustained progress, ultimate prosperity in the economy of Jamaica. And Ralston, this doesn't help. The Observer headline, hospital health,
Yes.
health,
Yes.
and what it tells the story by quoting a number of junior doctors, article by Kimon Francis, is that there is that all that is pictured as being positive and pretty in the health sector is just not so.
Well, we have been hearing the junior doctors speaking for about 2 weeks now, and they are stressing that they are getting a lot of PR from Dr. Thompson, but things are fundamentally bad in the hospital system.
When a doctor has to stay with a patient and ventilate them for hours
Yes.
before there's a mechanical assistance, that is beneath our 21st century standards, our 50-odd years of independence.
Right.
One.
Yes.
Two, when we have a situation where basic medicines and supplies
Right.
are not available, tests are not available.
Doctors have to carry their own light.
Patient has to be taken outside of the hospital
Yes.
because the machine is not working,
Right.
not for a week or two for servicing, but
Yes.
for long periods
Yes.
of time. When nurses are said to be leaving like flies.
Yes.
Really, what a horrible analogy, and yet probably justified by the swirl around in personnel.
Right.
No, this is not good.
Precisely. And now, that is what we're saying. So when we talk about, and this is very interesting, allowing the market, because we just had this conversation with the IMF resident representative to the country, allowing the market to dictate where resources go. So we saw what happened. So you allow the market to dictate where resources go, and we ended up with 1,000 apartments valued at between 25 and 44 million unoccupied, but down at the KPH, the doctors have to carry their own light.
So he doesn't see this.
He agrees. He agrees. He said that those are public goods which the state must fully...
Well, I'm so glad that you were able to tease that out of him, because I don't know the gentleman, except by repute, but the hagiography that he has been giving to elsewhere in the press is more serving their need for a winner, which we want to be too, rather than to fixate upon the reality that we are facing in this country. And I'm a little impatient, more than a little, that with people who are, in fact, make these bland or excessive public statements when they jolly well know better, or when they have prevented themselves from knowing better by abstracting themselves from any observation, if not participation, in the life of ordinary people. That's crazy. You must come out to the Bank of Jamaica and come out to the IMF office and come out to your pretty car and talk to and mingle among people and understand what they're facing. Yes, that's the key. That is what I'm saying. So obviously we need some serious intervention, both in the ordering and in the financing of the healthcare system.
Yes, and the education system, and there is no shortage of money.
Well, there you
it's a misallocation of the money. That is why we have the 1,000 apartments and the deficiencies in these areas.
So our listeners, they need to understand, and viewers, that the key thing that we're talking about now is recognizing the tremendous options that we have as a people, recognizing the huge improvements in life over the last 300 years. Yes?
Yes.
Alan Goldberg calls it the miracle.
Right.
Yes? That's brought about by the Industrial Revolution, by the epiphany of science and technology, okay? Not to be ungrateful for any of those.
Right.
We are enjoying a standard of living, even in this country, much better than we have in the past, but still a fraction of what it could be if human consciousness and human intentionality, were to utilize and exploit the possibilities, the resources that lie within us, and which we have others have helped us to create beyond us.
Precisely.
That is the point that we consistently make, and which politics ought to be serving rather than depressing.
Correct, or exacerbating. Well, Professor Samuelson contended that there's what we call poverty amid plenty. To the people who are poor in Jamaica, they wouldn't realize that this is the first time in the history of Jamaica that there's no shortage of money. This is the first time the government has been collecting so much more taxes than it projected for. This is the first time that interest rates have ever been so low.
By the way, it's the people's money.
People's money. Yes. People's money. The banking sector sits on 1.2 trillion of the people's savings. Securities dealers and other dealers another $3 trillion. So there's no shortage of money in Jamaica. Is what is it that we're allocating the money to do?
So why do we have poverty in the midst of plenty? Why is it that people are struggling for back to school, to get a bed in a hospital, to get a test when you have breast cancer or something else? Yes? Ask yourself. Shifting the focus in the limited time we have, I'm distressed that Mr. Hugh Dixon of the Trelawney South Trelawney Development Company says he has no allies in Parliament. Well, if you'll have me, Mr. Dixon, I'd like to be one. Okay? The battle lines are thickening in the corporate country dispute. But I have a resolution which I'm hoping to force the debate on that says, be it resolved that there should be no bauxite mining in Trelawney. And I'm anxious to believe that the Member of Parliament for South Trelawney, Mrs. Dalrymple Philibert, will support it. And I already know that Mr. Victor Wright, the Member of Parliament for North Trelawney, is in full support of that. Now that's going to be, it's not put forward glibly. It's put forward based upon an intelligent appreciation of the environmental value and tangible assets that are there, worth money. Worth money. And also a serious question which is to be answered regarding the value of the bauxite extraction from that area.
Precisely.
So you do have allies, sir. You need more allies, let me tell you, because the power of the multinational corporation
Yes.
is exceeding that of government, not only in Jamaica,
Globally.
but globally.
Yes.
Yes? And this is a manifestation, am I overstating? This could be a manifestation of exactly that,
Yes, of
Yes.
course, most certainly.
Yes.
Yes, which we have to prevent
which we have to prevent.
in order to protect the country.
And we always use current events to
Yes.
make these broader points. But the same thing is evident in the editorial in the Gleaner today regarding the complant, the
Yes.
sugar issue,
Sugar.
where
Yes.
the Gleaner says, look here to the lady who's in charge.
Miss Liu.
Yes, find out, tell us what is it you're really expecting from government.
Yes.
Because the lady is saying that they're losing money, they want to stay, but they're not sure if government is serious about the sugar industry.
Yes. Yes.
Now hold on, sir. That sounds to me, as it sounds to the Gleaner, very, very suspicious. And
Yes.
you have to support me with taxpayers' subsidy,
Right.
as we have done the sugar industry over the last
For years,
20 odd
for
years.
decades, yes.
Yes. And then I'll stay. If not, then from watch out.
Yes.
No.
That's precisely what she's
No,
saying.
but then that can't be. And you know, with respect to Senator Aubin Hill, you have an explanation for us, you know, sir. Because you negotiated that deal, I
Yes,
seem to
yes.
remember.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
During the previous
Yes.
JLP administration.
Yes. Yes.
And what are the safeguards we have? And why couldn't we have seen, why was it seen then as being a tremendous asset and benefit to the country?
Yes.
And it is now turning out to be a damp squib at best. Can you tell us? We don't think you should be silent, no, as you were not then. I think you have to help us through this unexpected but inevitable second chapter or further chapter of the saga of post-cane sugar economy.
Right.
Well, so once again, the multinational corporations
Yes.
have tremendous power.
Yes.
We are very dependent upon Chinese partnership
Yes.
for our, whatever hopes we have of economic development.
Right.
They operate in a very centralized way.
Certainly.
And they will not be pleased if one of their companies bombs out
Yes.
in Jamaica.
Yes.
It will affect us.
Yes.
And therefore, we better be clear as to how we play this one.
Certainly.
Yes, that's key. And just before we go, Mr. Ralston Hammond, I see in the press where the IMF is contradicting Mr. Trump regarding China being a currency manipulator.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just the politics that he's playing. The Chinese responded by dropping the yuan for a day in order to send him a signal that this is a tool that we could use if you continue down the improvement path that you're going. So what he's doing is prematurely declaring them as a currency manipulator, stressing that they're manipulating the currency in order to gain trade advantages.
But the benefit, the sanction for being a currency manipulator
Is tougher sanction.
as you explained,
Yes.
would be being reported to the IMF.
Yes.
And the IMF is now saying, don't go with that.
No, because it's not true. The
Because it's
IMF
not-
knows that he's the
it's
one
not
who is
true.
creating this problem.
And to me, what this indicates is that there is a whole cloud of fake news and of fake impressions
Precisely.
that is now gaining the currency of state authority in
Yes.
the United States.
Yes.
And I'm obliged to say there are tendencies of it right here in Jamaica,
Yes.
where government says things that they know it's not true.
Yes.
Yes, projects things as if they have been achieved, and fools up the people in terms of their effective action in respect of some of the things that everybody calls upon to be remedied.
Right, and that gives us a very good segue into the next subject, because they had reported the 2016 poverty figures as if they were the current figures, and then the 2017 numbers leaked out,
Yeah.
and then we have Minister Clark all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we want to say 2018 now, not
Yes.
to score any points,
Yes.
but to have a factual basis on which the progress of the people can in fact be achieved. And to discuss more of that when we come back on Power Talk Live, from poverty to prosperity, for whom Dr. Canute Thompson is our guest. Welcome back to Power Talk Live. We're now joined by head of the Caribbean Center for Education Planning, Dr. Canute Thompson, public commentator. Canute, morning and welcome.
Thank you very much, Ronnie. Good morning.
Happy to have you, Ralston and I.
Good morning, Ralston.
Your
Good
piece
morning. How you doing?
yesterday, From Poverty to Prosperity, for whom? Well, let us begin with a little history. Who has become prosperous during this campaign for prosperity, and particularly with relation to the tax threshold being moved to 1.5 million? Who has really become prosperous? Can we use that word truthfully, or is it part of a cloud of public relations?
Yeah, I think it's part of a cloud of public relations. The people who have become prosperous are largely those who, for example, last year, when the government gave a $14 billion tax relief, the persons who become prosperous are the real estate developers and other people who do those transactions. I think the transfer tax was dropped from 5% to 2%. That's a 60% reduction. That's money in the pocket of people who build houses and sell them on a large scale. Those are people who are becoming prosperous. The people who earn over $1.5 million have not become prosperous. I mean, to fund that 1.5 million threshold, the government literally imposed taxes of the same amount, slightly over, to give you back. It's literally a case of government taking from you with one hand and giving you back in the other. So the prosperity has really come to a few people at the top, and that's a sad reality. And it speaks to the deficit in our public discourse, as well as the danger of making policy on the fly. Because this 1.5 million
was made on the fly.
Was made on the fly.
Yes.
Was it, well, this leads to the question, was it intentional, or is it a fact that we weren't just bright enough to see the real implications of this thing? It's very important going forward because it was a splendid PR job, wasn't it?
It was, and the fact that people who were not in a job and were turning up at government offices the day after election asking about their 18,000. In the context of a prime minister who people agree is an excellent communicator, so that people listening to this person would have believed that this $18,000 was it. I recall some of the ads. It did not make a distinction. It said $18,000 more in your pocket. If you want to expand your little chicken pen, if you want to build another room, this is $18,000 more in your pocket. So the government was being, in my view at the time, opposition, deliberately fast and loose with the communication to lead people to believe that this was money they're going to be getting.
Right. And it also capitalized on the national psychology of corruption, where people wanted to get something for nothing. That's a part of the problem.
Yeah.
Well, how can you sustain this? I wouldn't be surprised if in the next budget there is a considerable give back to the public.
Yeah.
I'm expecting that there'll be a lowering of the rate of GCT,
Yes.
as well as other measures.
Yes.
Now, is this prudent? Isn't this the expected and legitimate fruit of the years of frugality that we've been having?
Yeah, I think that one expects that next year, 2020 being an election year, there's going to be significant give back. The question is whether that give back will be sustainable or in the next year thereafter, or if the government might take other measures to recoup that money. My fear is that the give back is going to be designed to stimulate emotions rather than further to build out the country's developmental needs and capacities.
Well, let's examine that, because here are we this morning, hospital hell.
There you go.
Yes, this is what the money is to be put into.
Yes.
And given your avocation and my interest in education, we could absorb billions of dollars fruitfully.
Yes.
Frugally spent.
Yes.
Targeted objectives, which fits in with what Rassen and I were discussing earlier in terms of building human capital.
Without a doubt.
So this is what we want to come out of this discussion, you know, not only to point out the charade and the pretense that has gone on, but also to say this is the difference that ought to be implemented.
Yes.
Right.
Earlier this year, I think the government committed to provide support for research and development, and had in the budget, I think, $200 million.
No sign of it.
no sign of it, but worse than that, while one accepts that that's a start, if you're really serious about research to support development,
you need $2 billion.
You need $2 billion to start with. And it tells you where the government's priorities are. I keep coming back to this, and I regrettably won't apologize for it. If the government were to find $500 million right now to cut grass to advance a political agenda, it would. So I think we need one, in addition to creating structures which force or direct the government to invest the country's resources in ways that promote development, such as in education, providing better nutrition and better stimulation and better institutional support at the early childhood level, providing more resources to schools. In addition to that, we have to make laws which make it difficult for government to use money recklessly without consequences.
Which brings us to a point and a question that Ronnie has been asking. Can this current political system take us to where we want to go? Because just as Canute is saying, so what we saw recently, we saw in the recent budget the bulk of the money being transferred to those at the top, as we said, to the point now where we have 1,000 apartments valued at between 25 and 44 million empty. Then we have the problem in the health sector, and we have the problem in the education sector. So that's a misallocation of resources. Now, as Canute is saying, we have to have institutions that prevents that, which means that the current political system that we have will have to see significant changes. Additionally, in terms of resources, that's on the fiscal side. On the monetary side, additionally, we should have a system in place. We're having a new central bank governor in maybe 5 days' time. We should have a system where that central bank governor would have to come to the parliament to testify about his policies. What is he going to do in terms of fixing the broke monetary transmission mechanism? What is he going to do in terms of the exchange rate before he's confirmed?
Well, again, our institutions don't provide for that.
Precisely.
Yes. And therefore, I'm hurrying on the discussion, but to provoke you, one of the reflections that I have, being in now the opposition, previously in government, is that I don't think that any opposition can make the difference within the limitation of the present structures. You can make some difference.
Yes.
There is certainly you can make there's basis for a choice, but it can't take us where we need to go unless we fundamentally think the social and principles and the consequential economic policies and priorities. What do you think?
I agree. I think that on the legislative side, we need to look at the long-time issue of separating the executive from the representational bodies.
You mean going like the United States?
Something like that, but I recognize that even that has a potential for gridlock and for political one-upmanship. But I believe that the question of giving space to opposition proposal that addresses corrective measures in terms of how funds are allocated, in terms of government policy, whether monetary or fiscal, I think greater leverage needs to be given to the people who represent people across the country. But alongside that, Ronnie, and this is the only way it's going to work, we need to have, Ralston, a citizenry which is active and conscious.
Right.
I am heartened by what I see coming out in relation to the cockpit country. In Sunday's paper, there was a group of experts.
Indeed.
It was encouraging to see people coming together and asserting that we're standing for something. All right? And again, in today's paper, there was another piece by Dickie Crawford. So I believe that citizens' consciousness and citizens' activism will be necessary if we're going to force the political directorate to take heed to what the people are saying.
Precisely.
Another thing that has given me a lot of encouragement, I take it that polls are sometimes a reflection of a reality
Yes.
in time, but may not be continuous. But there's something coming out of this latest poll, for what it's worth. If Bill Johnson found that over the last 23 years of doing polls, typically corruption doesn't figure in people's concern.
Yes.
It is almost non-existent, 1%. In the latest poll, 5% of the
Yes.
people
Yes.
are saying that this is something in the top list of 8.
Which is a very good sign.
Which is a massively good sign.
Yes,
It's a
yes.
massive good sign. So I believe that we need to nurture and promote that level of citizens' activism
Yes.
and interest. And I believe that we should use all the various media platforms. I have committed to undertake an initiative called the Corruption Stop Coalition.
Okay.
And I've been meeting with
Corruption stock.
Corruption Stop. Corruption Stop. STOP. CSC, Corruption Stop Coalition. And I've been meeting with a number of people pursuant to this. I've been getting emails from across the country of people who have expressed support in it. I'll be meeting with a major bilateral partner of Jamaica later this week to discuss this.
Yes.
They are interested in giving support to it. And one of the things I've emphasized is that this is a grassroots citizen organization.
Yes.
That's why I call it a coalition.
Yes.
And we have to put a stop to, with $100 billion each year going to corruption.
Yes.
That is the hospital hell we're having running.
Precisely.
That is why we don't have lights in operating theaters.
Yes.
At KPH we have 9 operating theaters and sometimes 5 of them are out.
Yes.
Now think of the people with emergency surgery, with vascular surgery, with hearts, with all the various needs. If half of your capacity is down, it means that hundreds of people are put on a waiting list and some of them put out to die.
Precisely.
That's what corruption is doing to the country.
Yep. And if we come back to the subject that we're discussing. Now, the kind of excuses that we're getting from the authorities, the nonsensical excuses in relation to poverty, what they should be doing is saying that, by the way, we're going to do a supplementary budget that looks at the problems in the Ministry of Education, looks at the problems in the health sector, looks at the problem in the social sector, because we have enough resources to do that, rather than proceed along the same path that is creating all of these problems and then giving all these nonsensical excuses about
Well,
poverty.
this is a cloud of public relations of which I speak.
Yeah.
Now, I'm interested and elated to hear of Canute's Corruption Stop Coalition.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is that the necessity for that reflects adversely on the structures of power.
Yes.
Absolutely.
In the country.
It does. It does.
Yes. And while it speaks to the instant predicament where we have, for example, the Prime Minister really hasn't spoken out on the issue of Petrojam
Yes.
Yes.
or of the Ministry of Education.
Yes.
It just hasn't. Now, these things are left pending under the pretext of investigations,
Right.
which could go on forever, will, and aided and abetted by some obfuscation by others. Now, if you demean the political structures and the economic fundamentals that undergird them, a coalition against corruption can do its work, but still it points to a need for radical reform.
Yes.
Yeah.
Of
Institutional reform.
Yes,
Yes,
of
yes.
these institutions.
Yes, yes.
And that is my concern. When we come back from the break on Power Talk Live with Dr. Canute Thompson, he writes and asks us, you, me, the viewers, the listeners, a question. Poverty, we know about that. To prosperity, not sure. And for whom? Soon come. Thanks for staying with us on Power Talk Live. Can we agree then, Dr. Canute Thompson, Ralston Hammond, that if we're going to move from poverty to prosperity, we have to have strong institutions?
Yes.
That we have to be willing to turn some of them upside down, but maintain their, in order to strengthen their integrity, their serviceability.
Without a doubt. Let me just look at the specific issue about where we are now with the poverty situation. So your viewers and your listeners should remember that the government had promised then that we would move from poverty to prosperity. But the larger point I want to make is that The result of the latest measure that the government implemented is that almost 60,000 people
Have been added
have been added
to the poverty.
to the poverty.
Poverty.
Yep, 69,000 to be
Yes.
precise.
All right, good.
So
No.
what does the Economic Growth Commission,
Yes.
what them say?
We haven't heard from them.
All right.
But you can't take bush on this one.
We haven't heard from them.
If you, go ahead.
No, I think, as I was saying on another program, I think it was that we need to try to put in context what 60,000 people
Yes.
mean.
69.
69. There are 63 constituencies across Jamaica, and we have a voters list last time of about 1.3 million. What this means is that the number of people who have been made impoverished, who have been made poorer, is twice the amount of voters in the average constituency across Jamaica.
Yes.
All right? The biggest constituency will give you 30,000 people. All right?
4 times the population of the
And
University of
4
West
times the population of the University of West Indies. Feel that with me, all right? We are talking about a large number of people whose lives have become worse since this policy. But as I said in the previous segment, this was a policy implemented on the fly at the last minute
Desperation.
to catch votes.
Yeah, man.
Part of the institutional correction for that, Ronnie Ralston, I think, would be a mechanism which would require that every proposed tax measure that the government or an opposition party puts on the table is reviewed by an independent or at least a highly technical group of people
Okay.
who would assess the impact of that policy measure on growth, on the poor, on the various sectors,
Right.
and then we could make a decision about its wisdom. But no political party, no government should be permitted to introduce new tax measures without it being subject to rigorous technical review by a group of people.
Fundamental point, but that committee would have to have strong teeth, because even in the US where you have the Office of Management and Budget, Donald just ignores the Office of Management and Budget and
Yes.
just do whatever he wants to do.
Well, that
Yeah,
again,
yes.
because you may have a group of people who have leanings
Right.
and who analyze things through their political lenses rather than
Precisely.
right. So which then comes back now to the role of civil society
Yes.
and citizen consciousness. And so part of the mechanism would be for those policies to be also debated, discussed in some way, in some town hall setting. And finally, Ronnie Ralston, I believe that where we have a policy that is implemented contrary to the advice of a technical group, but more so where the policy impact
Yes.
is deleterious
Yes.
in context, in situations the government would say this would be the policy impact. And you don't have things like natural disaster.
Right.
The government that makes that policy should be held accountable through impeachment.
Yeah, but here now, look at what you're doing.
Yes.
The entire Westminster construct
Right.
emerged from a feudal background where it was the primary canon was that the representatives of the people who had to secure their support would be and should be the reasonable arbiters of public policy, public expenditure, rather than the nobles or the king or the church.
Right.
Okay?
Yes.
Now, what are we doing in all of these proposals? We are now saying that our application of that principle, yes, has become so suspect, so undermined, so much ambushed, that we now have to build institutions of so-called independents
Yes.
who are elected by nobody.
Yes.
Yes, and who are ultimately accountable to nobody but themselves.
Right.
Yes, not to demean them.
Yes.
And we are saying that they have to be set up, this whole panoply of guards at the gates, in order to prevent the simony, the nepotism, the corruption of the elected officials.
Right. Because under
How we come to this?
under the present structure, the allocation of resources are also being determined by persons who the people have not voted for too, because of their money power. That is why you can have campaign finance reform. And that is why when the government presents a budget, as long as certain groups sign off on the budget, it becomes the law.
Yeah. But do you agree with me
Yes.
that little discourse on history shows that we really need to fundamentally look
Yes.
fundamentally
Right.
at our structures?
Yes.
Yes, and I think, Ronnie, it's not a case that, at least the way I envisage it, it's not that we are replacing the role of the elected representative with that of the technocrat. What I see is a situation where the technocrat, and if you can get us a sufficiently large group of diverse minds, they offer an opinion, an analysis. But in the end of the day, the decision on whether to implement policy will remain that of elected representatives,
Yes.
which
But
might be.
what we're saying is that those who presently have the power are
Yes.
not sufficiently informed, are not sufficiently amenable perhaps to the advice that they're getting,
Well,
and in some respects either fail to make decisions. I thought we were spending 10% of our GDP almost on providing exactly the kind of bureaucracy that should have done that.
well, if you look at how things are done now,
Is it working? Did it work with
Truthfully-
the Caribbean Maritime University and the Ministry
that's the
of
point I'm
Education?
making. If you look at how things are done
Did it
truthfully
work
now,
with the Board of Petrochemical?
no,
and the
it's not
ministry behind
working.
it?
No,
Yeah.
it's not working. So we need to have changes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're not a person given to despair, Ronnie, but I'm feeling some despair. But let me say two things. That one, that whilst we have Petrojam, CMU, Ministry of Education, and possibly other things of which we do not know, there are, I believe, other entities and ministries which have been less irresponsible, less corrupt, and we need to find those and hold those up as examples.
Yes.
What I think would prove to be our undoing is if, after all we know of Petrojam and CMU and ministry, if nobody is held accountable.
Yes.
And I think,
Well, we're headed in that direction, aren't we?
and
Unfortunately,
Yes.
I mean, forgive me for being the Job's comforter, but that we're heading in that
That
direction.
direction.
And I think our viewers and listeners
yes.
really need
well,
to.
and this is where citizens need to
This is where
be
your-
committed to take
Yes.
the matter in
this
their
is where
hands.
your coalition
Yeah.
really makes sense. How do
Yes.
people associate themselves with that?
Thank you very much, Ronnie. People can, we're starting first of all with a social media campaign. So we're asking people to
Sharing that?
to share that, to retweet stop corruption or hashtag corruption stop. All right? People can write to me at canutethomson1@gmail.com for now and indicate their interest in supporting the coalition
Canute Thompson 1
at Gmail,
numeral 1
numeral 1.
at gmail.com.
right?
Okay, and tweet stop corruption.
Stop corruption. Hashtag stop corruption. We will be launching the coalition in another couple of weeks. We'll be making an announcement ahead of the coalition. We are currently meeting with partners, and we will be able to make an announcement on this in the month of September.
Dr. Knut Thompson, moving from poverty to prosperity, assumes that we can get a hold and a decrease in corruption.
It does. It requires that, Ronnie. It requires that.
What we're doing on this program, what you're doing more broadly, is of absolute importance. Let's encourage our viewers and listeners to associate themselves. This is not a 9-day wonder. This is a fundament of the movement towards a better Jamaica. Thank you, sir, so much for being with us as usual. Dr. Canute Thompson, head of the Caribbean Center for Educational Planning at the University, public commentator, joins Ranson Hammond of Real Business and myself today for Powertalk Live. And that's it for the program for today. We give way now to the other proceedings, and Powertalk will resume after the break. Thank you so much to all those who have made this program possible, all our sponsors, all our listeners and viewers. Look forward to the next time. Goodbye.